going to be going through, you already know. This is a reminder, because in the midst of battle, sometimes we have to be reminded exactly what we're up against, as well as the things that we know work. We know it works. But in the midst of battle, sometimes we forget about it. As you can see here, Satan hates Christian marriages. And in particular, marriages of disciples who choose to imitate Christ and promote the church powerfully in their marriage. In Ephesians 5, it talks about the fact that we will begin to promote and edify the church through our marriage. Satan aims to destroy the Christian marriage covenant, because by doing so, he can hinder the witness of Christ to the world, while at the same time stealing our joy and replacing it with misery. You know, the thing is, I was talking with Phil, one of the things we realized is, and we can evangelize and we should evangelize, but sometimes when things are not going well in the house, sometimes that's the last thing we think about. So we've got to get this together. We've got to figure out how to love each other unconditionally, so that we can make it through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that this part is really important, because the analogy, I love when Dave told me what he wanted to talk about, the analogy of the Vietnam War being something never seen before. And that's what this COVID-19 is for us. It's something that none of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. And so we cannot, the problem with the Vietnam War, we were in a different war, but fighting it with old tools and methods and weapons. And as disciples, as married disciples, in this time, we have to, you know, fight this COVID war and the spiritual part of it with different weapons. We can't have the same old things that we used to do in terms of our faith or our prayer life or our quiet times or any of those things. And these things are convicting for me as well, because I know I have to take it up. So the only way that we're going to be able to really be victorious on the other side spiritually is to be able to realize that and fight in a different way, fight Satan in a different way. One of the things that you hear people talking about so much is just, or beginning to think, what is this going to look like on the other side? What does recovery look like on the other side? And we truthfully, we have no idea. But as Christians, we know that if we are not bonded together in our marriages with our spouses and with God, we can pretty much guess what it's going to look like on the other side.
So there are a couple of things that I think we want to begin to focus on here. And you know, folks, there are many things that we could talk about. We don't have time, won't allow us to go through all the various aspects of this battle that we're going through. But I do want to have us begin to focus in on a couple of areas. During this pandemic, there are two primary opportunities that are afoot here. The first one is, as we have been stilled, as we've been calmed down from our sometimes harried schedule, we can take this time to get close to God, closer to our spouses. And when we talk about close to God in deep quiet times, where I think, Phil, you may have mentioned at one time that by the time we come out of it, we're changed. Whatever it was that we're dealing with, whatever we were having issue with, our quiet time should change us. So that's one thing. But there's another opportunity at foot here. And that's that Satan has an opportunity to roam even closer to us. And if we're not careful, he will get between us. Right. Because tempers can get short, space gets tight, and these things happen. So we have to be on guard.
Amen.
So let's kind of focus on, when we began to, since we all realize that we're in a war here, we're trying to figure this out, this battle. It may be good for us to really talk about how will Satan go after us? And again, there are many things. The possibilities are endless. He might induce a husband or wife to put too much emphasis on a career or spend too much time pursuing houses, cars, and material wealth. And not necessarily in this COVID-19 environment, but I tell you, you can get on the internet and browse through like I've done and look at car after car. Whatever you want to do, you can just fill your mind with things because, man, what else do I have to do? Well, of course, there are other things we can do, but we'll talk about that.
Right.
He might introduce envy or jealousy or dishonesty into the relationship.
Yep.
Or entice one of them to be unfaithful. He can wait until the first fires of romantic love begin to fade and then plant whispers of doubt in our minds about the wisdom of our decision to marry in the first place.
I missed you today.
Again, if you can mute your phone, that'd be great. Thank you. If any of these strategies don't work, folks, he can use greed, lust, pornography, drug or alcohol addiction, even gambling. You can gamble online now. You can stir up rebellion among the kids and incite us to blame one another for our children's issues, as well as employ social pressures and media messages to bring out the worst. Those are all at his disposal, and we got to be ready for it. So one of the things that Satan will do, and I know we know this again, and this is more of a reminder, is that he specializes in magnification in close quarters. So what do I mean by that? In other words, he directs our gaze to the simple things like fatigue, personal failures, goals not met, setbacks, other obstacles that are common to all of us. You know, it's funny how we can look at someone and say, man, I wish she or wish he did better in this, yet we have our own failings. We have our own shortcomings. But Satan's game here is to get us to look critically at one another and, believe it or not, ourselves. We realize that we are full of flaws, that we make mistakes. And then we realize that maybe we're not good enough, or we think we're not. However, we accept the fact that we're flawed children of God who are learning as we go, we can accept our imperfections. You know, it's funny, if we expect immediate perfection, it would mean denying the opportunity for growth and the gift of repentance and the power of Christ in our lives.
So, you know, just kind of talking about this and the whole concept of our marriage and COVID-19 and the fact that, you know, our spiritual battle has been accelerated. And just as Dave has been sharing about being the magnification of being in close quarters, and even for some of us that may have a pretty sizable house, you know, you're still, you know, don't be deceived that there's still not the ability for attention or things to build. And so I think about us as women, you know, if we were soldiers in a war, what would we become? And, you know, they say whatever, there's a, you know, if something is bad in normal times, it's going to be magnified in a crisis. And so who we are or who we can be, or the things as women that are, you know, kind of flaws, for lack of a better word, in our marriage can be magnified. And so there were three ladies that came to mind for me. And so the first one is fault finding Felicia. Now, Felicia, the Felicia in us, is the wife who just her husband can't quite do anything right. And there's always a fault in it. And, but it can even be presented in a way that we think we're adding improvement. But what it is no matter what our husband does, there's some, well, you know, and the reality is there may not be anything wrong with the way he's doing it. It just may not be the way we want it done. So we find fault. And fault finding Felicia is not somebody you want in the trenches with you during a war. So as women, we have to fight her. Or another person is nagging Nancy. I'm nagging, nag. Do this, do that. Did you do this? Will you do that? When are you going to do this? How about this? What about this? When did this happen? Are you saying this? What about this? Are you doing this? Nagging. And so again, we think, well, I don't nag. It used to be an old, I'm dating myself, TV commercial for some headache medicine. And one of the things said, I don't nag, your mother nags. Well, we're somebody's mother who nags, okay? And so if you are that person who is a nagging Nancy, but you think you really are a helpmate, you know, I'm not nagging, I'm being helpful with that. Again, this is the time that we just give Satan the arsenal in our marriage. And so who we really want to be is Proverbs 31, Penelope. She was that wife. I see people laughing and nudging each other in these. So, okay, I think I may have hit a couple nerves. We want to be Proverbs 31 Penelope. And you know, the thing about the Proverbs 31 wife, it said in verse 11, her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. And then as it went on to talk about all the different things that she did, in verse 23, it said her husband is respected at the city gate where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. See, the Proverbs 31 wife did what she needed to do so her husband could sit at the city gate. Sometimes we want to sit at the city gate. So we're not doing what we need to do, or we're mad because our husband could sit at the city gate, but we can't. Where do I sit? You know, I don't like sitting back here. I want to sit at the city gate. Where's the ladies' gate or whatever? But this is a time really, if you're not, you know, there's some of us who are working from home and the work is crazier than it was. I'm one of those. So it's crazy. But to the extent that we can accomplish some of those things that we really wanted to do, to be a Proverbs 31 wife around the house, a helpmate to our husband and a support, as well as, you know, great to our kids and taking care of things, let's try to do that. Because the thing is, sisters, this is hard on everybody. It's hard on our husband. You know, fault finding Felicia and nagging Nancy look at him and say, well, he's just doing X. Or why isn't he doing that? I'm doing all this and he's watching Netflix, or he's looking at cars, or he's doing whatever. But it's stressful on everybody. So it's imperative that we really stick to our role as the Proverbs 31 wife and trust that God will bless that.
Amen. All right. We're going to go on and look at a couple of other things here. Something else that Satan does, and he's very good at it, and that's the art of diversion. Satan will use diversion to deflect and reroute what the real issues are. If we have low self-esteem, if we're not in our Bible, if we're not getting our self-esteem from God and trying to get it from our spouse, and we'll talk about that a little later, we feel we won't measure up. And when we don't feel that we'll measure up, everything that is said or done is treated as an indictment on us. It's proof. Yep, just like I thought, my spouse doesn't think I'm good enough. She's always pointing out my shortcomings. You know, the always is a adjective that actually is not true. But when we're in a period, or if we're feeling lack of esteem, it turns into always. Extreme words that really are not accurate. Unfortunately, Satan uses diversion to distract attention from conflicts, stresses, and fears that actually need to be dealt with. You know, as we talked about the last time we got together, we talked about the importance of just being able to communicate effectively, because you really need to have time to sit and discuss without judgment all the issues that are probably there that need to be resolved. And if you have trouble with it, you got to call another disciple in so they can help. You know, this stuff that we're talking about, these things that God wants us to do, are only as good if we make the decision to do it. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've looked at the Bible, and the Bible is clear, absolutely clear on what needs to be done. Yet I take, as Phil talked about, I think in his last sermon, I take my own plan and I implement it. Something that's totally different from the word that I just finished reading. And those are the things that we've got to guard against. Okay. Okay. So what can we do? And again, there are many things we can do. And time doesn't allow us to go through each one. But one thing for sure is that we can bear with one another. In Colossians 3, verse 13, it says, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. You know, in war, there are events that are identified, and I'm sure we're all familiar with friendly fire. And, you know, the thing is, when I did a little research on it, you know, friendly fire has been around since the 1700s. This didn't happen just in the 80s or 90s, been around forever. Retired Army Colonel Peter Mansour, who was now a professor of military history at Ohio State University, said, war is a very human endeavor and mistakes inevitably will occur. Life is a human endeavor. Living together is a human endeavor. In this particular instance, when we are close and tension is great and fear is high, it's a human endeavor to be able to deal with it in a positive way.
You know, this bear with one another is a part, sisters, where we really have to kill Nancy and Felicia, and she has to die, because neither of them have the real capability to bear with, because forgiveness is the key. And forgiveness is a constant. It's not a one-time thing, just like sins are constant. You're not going to do this once and never do it again. We would hope that, but we know the flesh is usually not capable of that. So in the bear with one another, I think we have to really be cognizant of that and not do with the friendly fire. Again, we can disguise our pettiness, for lack of a better word, in a number of ways. Helpful, supportive. I'm a helpmate. I know he wants to be his best. I'm helping him to be his best. I'm really promoting my husband. We talked about him sitting at the city gate. He can't sit there unless he does these things, which, and so none of those things are right or righteous. So we just have to be conscious of our friendly fire. We have to be not only conscious, but we have to fight it, because we know when we're sending friendly fire. We know it. And so that's where the bear with one another comes in.
Yep. So here's the thing, folks. And I've talked about this. I've had, you know, many people come up and understand. Listen, I get it. I understand. Someone, your wife, your husband, says something that they shouldn't say. You know, not too long ago, I did a little video. Some people thought it was a jazz ensemble that Phil put together. But anyway, I was talking about not taking an offense, and the character and the maturity that it takes to not do so. None of us are perfect. In this situation, it's more than likely that someone is going to say something sharply, say something in a way that they would not normally say. They'll utter something that they wish they hadn't. Things happen. We got to have the character and the maturity to let it roll off. Not everything has to be a battle, folks. Because here's the thing, and a lot of the folks in our Bible talk, we've talked about this quite a bit. Where does our esteem really come from? If something that our wife says is going to trigger us to the point where we're going to lose it, we're looking for our esteem really from our wife or our husband. And you know what, folks? That's not where it comes from. It has to come from God. Mm-hmm. If it hurts now, you got to be honest and open. But I think the thing is, you've got to really look at this passage. You know, this passage is a big weapon for us. Our heavenly commander put it in a way that calls out our hypocrisy if we don't heed it, because it says, forgive as the Lord forgave you. So each time my wife or someone's husband or whoever says something and we are having a hard time forgiving and getting over it, we're hypocritical. You know it and I know it because of this last part of that passage. Another thing that we have an opportunity to do is serve and love. And I wanted to read this passage in 2 Samuel because I think it was really, really appropriate. And 2 Samuel 23, verse 15, it says, David longed for water and said, oh, that someone would get me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem. So the three mighty men broke through the Philistine camp, drew water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem, and brought it back to David. But he refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out to the Lord. He said, far be it from me, O Lord, to do this. Is this not the blood of men who risked their lives? So he refused to drink it, and such were the exploits of the three mighty men. The reason why I bring this up is because we got to look for opportunities in the midst of everything we're doing. And I know we got kids running around. I know people are working from home, but what it means to serve someone and serve our spouse in tough times and in tense times, it is a breath of fresh air. It's something that signifies that I care. It's something that, you know, a slice of pie, a glass of water, a cup of tea. Instead of retreating and getting an attitude when things get tight, this is an opportunity for us to serve, to push through and actually offer something in love. You'd be surprised what some of these things will do for us in our relationships. So we're going to begin to close out in a little bit and open it up for questions. But before I do, I wanted to quickly go through some things and by the way, we're going to, if anyone is interested in these slides, Phil will be able to get them out to you because there's some things in here, especially this last area that I think may be useful. But if I can get my screen to work here, there we go. There are 10 deceptive strategies Satan will use during this pandemic, or basically any time for that matter. Lie number 1, your spouse is meant to satisfy your deepest longings. If I had a buzzer, it would go, ah. But I think more importantly is, what is Satan's attack strategy? And he's going to whisper things like, your needs are not being met, they're being ignored, you deserve better than this, your spouse is not making you happy or putting you first. God's truth is, the only one that can truly satisfy and make us happy is him. No person has the ability to meet all my needs or satisfy my deepest longings. They just can't. As much as they want to, they can't. Lie number two, if you don't have the energy to invest in your relationship, that's okay. The attack strategy, you are so tired. You don't have the energy to invest in the relationships with your spouse like you used to. Besides, you're married. You don't need to do that anymore. They don't appreciate it anyway, and they don't do it for you either. God's truth, my spouse is a gift, and I need to make it a priority to invest in the relationship. God can give me the strength I need, even when I'm tired, to nurture our marriage relationship. Okay, I skipped line number two.
You did too.
Did I do
That was
two?
two.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, lie number three, you can still grow in your marriage without intentionally trying. Attack strategy, you know you haven't had much time to talk with your spouse lately, but your brain needs a break. You are mentally exhausted. Take some time, scroll through Facebook for a little bit. Oh, you need to catch up with your favorite show. Hey, Netflix. God's truth, we never know how much time we have, and we need to make the most of the time we're given. The Bible tells me to redeem the time and to live a disciplined life. I need to be careful that I don't waste it. Lie number four, date night isn't something that you and your spouse need to prioritize anymore. The tax strategy, you are so busy. You got to help the kids, you got to do all this work, and probably you should be more involved at church. Date night can wait. We all know. And if you haven't, you'll learn that you got to take time. You've got to take time to enjoy the spouse that God has given you. Your marriage is more important than anything. More important, believe it or not, than the kids. And it's imperative that we get together and have fun together. Marriage is about making each other happy. The attack strategy. You deserve to be happy, and you could really use some romance in your life. You need someone who will meet that need. You should really think about leaving if things don't get better soon. Yep, we're talking about this kind of stuff because it's real. Marriage is not about our happiness, folks. It is a picture of Christ in the relationship to his church. It is meant to point others to him. Yes, romance is wonderful, and it's a part of our marriage, but we need to be committed to our spouse and the covenant that we have made. Yeah.
So on this one, in terms of happiness, I think we need to redefine happiness, because most of the time we think of happiness as I'm happy. I'm happy. You could be miserable as all get out, but I'm happy. So that's good. Versus us being happy in our marriage and grateful for the things that God has given us. So, and if we are doing that, we will be happy in that.
Yeah. Yeah, pleasure can definitely be derived if we take God's word seriously and we live our lives and we handle our marriage accordingly, we will be happy. But it is not the number one thing that we need to be looking at. And a lot of people think that it is. Lie number 6, you're owed something out of the marriage. Satan's attack strategy, you have the right to do what you want to do. You work hard and you're owed something. You work all day and you deserve to rest. You deserve to be appreciated. You deserve a break from the kids and from him or her. The God's truth, my life is not my own. I am called to serve my family and have a calling on my life to faithfully observe and obey God, regardless of how I feel. You know, sometimes you just are not feeling it. In life, in marriage, you're not feeling it. And this is when, and we've talked about this before, faith brings about obedience, and obedience brings about faith. You do what is right, even though you may not feel it, but you do what is right, and we follow God and we trust God. Things turn out a lot better than we ever expected. A budget is restrictive and your money is yours to spend as you want. A tax strategy of Satan is don't worry about budgeting. Why even try? Plus, you need a bigger house, a better car. Your kids need to be in a bigger yard, and you need to be in a nicer neighborhood. You can get a part-time job to finance if you need to. God's truth is we need to learn how to be a good steward of all that God has given us. We don't need all that culture says we need, something that I found out and continue to find out. It's more important that we use our funds wisely and responsibly, and that we be generous with what we've been given. Lie number 8, that person's husband or wife has something mine doesn't. Satan's attack strategy. Don't you wish your spouse was more like your friend's spouse? I bet he doesn't play video games all evening or work late. If your spouse had a job like his, you'd be able to do much more. The truth from God is that comparisons are not wise and should not ever be done. We need to continue to pray for God to work in our hearts and pray that we learn how to best serve and encourage each other. We also have to be content with who we've been given and try to build our marriage to make it something that we desire and long for. Lastly, last two, your spouse is the one at fault, not you. A tax strategy, you're not at fault. He doesn't realize how he comes across or the way that he talks to you causes you to respond in a particular way. He is the one or she is the one that needs to change, not you. Watch your muting, folks. Someone's on, please mute. God's truth, I'm responsible for how I respond. No matter what my spouse does or says, I will be held accountable for my actions. And the last one, you'll never change and you don't need to. Satan's attack strategy. You can't help it that you act this way. It's the way your parents were. You learned it from them and you'll never change. Of course, God's truth is no matter what our parents did or how we grew up, we don't have to choose to repeat the negative behavior. With the help of God, we can do what is right and honor God with our words and actions. Yeah.
And just on these strategies, you may think, well, why are they talking about this? We're in the house. I can't do any of this stuff. But really, some of it we can do, some of it we can't do, but it's the heart behind it that we have to guard ourselves, that who we are, whether it's these things or similar things or a variation of them, will be magnified in a situation like we're in now in the COVID-19 and in close quarters. So these are the things that the lies that Satan will put out there and that we have to guard against.
Amen. Amen. So listen, we wanted to open it up. If you have any questions or comments or things that maybe we could explain a little clearer, just unmute.